Quick recap, in part 1 I showed you the quickest rundown. In part 2 of the guide, I'm going to explain in depth of what I'm actually doing in game. So what I just showed you is the Dragon Rush. Not everyone can do it, and not every champion can do it either. Through many games of experimenting and testing, I found out Vi is one of the few junglers that can do this. There are other junglers that can do this better, like Rengar or maybe Fiddlesticks or something. Eve can also do it, but not as well. If you're not watching this video for a Vi guide, then you will have to do some experimenting to see if it's possible. I wouldn't try this on someone else like a Mumu or Yi. Basically anyone that has enough damage and some sort of shield or sustain can rush the dragon without altering their runes and masteries. There are some pros and cons. Pros: the first dragon is practically guaranteed. Depending on what elo you're in, the more dragons you get, the more it will boost your team up for laning and trading in team fights. You have a chance of getting all the dragons in the game because the more dragons you kill, the more they spawn. When it comes to late game, your team will do a lot better with all the dragon buffs. If you manage to get the elder dragon to boost all the dragons that you got, your team will be practically unstoppable. Cons: there are a lot of cons. Every time you take a dragon, you lose 10 CS and a gank because you're not clearing your full jungle. You cannot fight the enemy jungler since you're always playing from behind. In lower elos, if you don't get the fire dragon, your team cannot utilize it. Not to insult anyone, but a lot of times your team only knows how to use the fire dragon because they fight mindlessly. Your team doesn't think or understand what you're doing. In lower elos especially, they rage and flame more because everyone wants you to babysit them when they fail their lane. If they die by themselves because they're being dumb and you take dragon, they're gonna point the finger at you and blame you for it. In my games, people usually die within the first 5 minutes because they don't know how to play safe until you get there. Remember that your team are always impatient. If the game is over in 20 minutes, the dragon buffs that you grabbed will never be used. This tactic is entirely dependent on how good your skills are. For the most part, you're investing in your team. In solo queue, your team is always a toss-up. You don't know if your team is good or not. As you can see here, there are a lot of cons and pros, but we're gonna work on that. And I will show you what I do to compensate for all those cons to balance it out. Timers. The first dragon spawns at 2:30, assuming if you kill the dragon at 4 minutes into the game and the dragon spawns every 6 minutes, the second dragon will spawn at 10 minutes, third at 15 minutes, and fourth at 21 minutes. This means you can get 4 dragons in 21-22 minutes, but that's not realistic. All that is in theory. Okay, realistically, the most you can ever get in a perfect game is 3 dragons in 20 minutes. So here's a timeline that you should be following with the percent chance of you being able to secure dragon by yourself. You can get the first dragon during the 5 minutes of the game. This one is practically guaranteed 90% of the time. After 6 minutes, whether you can get it or not is questionable because of the enemy jungle path and the mid lane roam. 10 to 15 minutes into the game, depending if you get the first dragon or not. If you get the first dragon on time, killing it at 4 minutes into the game, the Rift Herald and the second dragon will spawn at the same time at 10 minutes into the game. So you will have to pick and choose which one you want depending on where you are in the game and what's going on. If you have to go bot lane, then pick up the dragon on the way after ganking bot. You can get the dragon 50-60% of the time, it depends on bot. If bot already destroyed their lane and top needs a gank, get the Rift Herald and then gank top. And use that rift to help kill 2 towers at top lane. Assuming that you're still following this timeline, the third dragon will spawn around 20 minutes into the game. This one is questionable. The third dragon is highly dependent on your team and how well they can cooperate with each other. Don't stress over getting this third dragon. This one is always a toss-up. The team might always be warding it or maybe not, or they might be contesting it. It's not that you need help killing dragon, it's more of whether your team can keep the enemy occupied. or if your team needs help at mid or something. Jungle explanation. Anyways, enough talk. To make this work, the number one thing you need is common sense. If you don't have common sense, leave immediately. I don't even know how you found this video in the first place. If you have never jungled before, I highly suggest that you play a couple games and then come back to this video. If you haven't played every other role such as top, mid, bot, and support, bookmark this video and come back to it in the future. Okay, so starting positions. When you first start the game, we're going to invade. In solo queue, 50% of the time people will not protect their team's jungle. People are selfish. They don't understand how important it is to have a jungler that can get ahead. In this season, majority of the people are starting at bot, which means you're going to invade top. Take note that there are a few junglers that need to start blue like a Moo or something. If that is the case, then invade bot instead. If you're lucky and your teammate is there while the enemy is alone, maybe you can get a kill, maybe not. If you're wrong and you see people there, leave. It's okay to use flash since you don't need it yet. Now you're going to swing around to the other side of their jungle without being seen. If they're actually protecting that too, then leave. It's okay. You'll just start at your own blue and get there fast. Whether you're invading or maybe you decided to start in your own jungle. Again, 50% of the time, people are selfish and they only worry about themselves, meaning you may or may not get a leash. If you get a leash, save your smite for dragon. If you don't get a leash, you might have to use your smite if you really have to. 2. Check the dragon pit and map. After you have killed the first jungle camp, ward to enemy jungle. For the most part, this ward isn't for you, it's for your teammates. Not only are you watching the map for your team, someone else on your team can watch the map and point things out. I find that deep wards helps a lot, especially with a second pair of eyes. Sometimes people just don't pay attention to your pings and they rather look at the map instead or something. Now look at the dragon pit and the map, then start thinking, do I want this dragon? Did anybody give me a leash or help? Should I gank or take the dragon or farm? You don't have to make the decision right now, but this is when I start thinking about things. Usually I make the decision quickly. Next, you're going to kill the jungle camps that will give you lots of XP, such as frog, another jungle buff, red, blue, wolf. So don't waste time with the scuttle right now. If you're invading blue and you know your jungler is slow, you can steal the frog. Otherwise, get your ass out of there before the other jungler comes and kill you. If you start it at your own blue, get the frog, skip the wolves, and then take your red. Most importantly is your red. Without the red buff, you will not be able to take dragon at level 3. People don't usually invade and take your red, but if that ever happens, it's okay, because you should have stolen the red buff at the beginning. However, if you catch a Lee Sin or something stealing your red, kick his ass. Since you didn't use smite at the beginning, you can smite save your red and kill him. If you stole his red buff and you don't have smite to take back your red, still kick his ass because you have the red buff to kill him. If nobody is stealing your red and you have the red buff, you can save your red buff for later just in case. You see, this is the real reason why I secure both buffs and I do the things I do. As you saw, it helps prevent counter jungling and it gets you ahead. After you get level 3, paint the map that the enemy jungler is coming. He's buffed on it. I don't know where he is. He should have showed up by now.
Plan? I don't need a plan.
Can Lee Sin do an early dragon? Oh, there he is.
No. You might think, what am I talking about? Am I psychic? Can I see into the future? Or am I making stuff up for this guy to make him look good? This is where your common sense and logic comes into play. This is why I told you to put a deep ward after you stole their jungle buff. It is okay if you forgot. I forget to put deep wards a lot of times, but for the most part, I can still predict where the jungler is. For the sake of simplicity, let's assume the jungler starts at bot side. There are a limited amount of moves the jungler can do. Remember that both of you guys should take around the same amount of time to kill the same monsters at the beginning. 1. He could have taken blue, frog, move top to take red, which means he will get ready to gank top or mid. If you took his red or blue, this means he will gank even faster because there's no jungle buff for him to kill. If you had a ward there and the jungler hasn't shown up yet, it means the jungler is taking a sweet time to clear his entire jungle. Most likely he isn't going to gank. If you had a ward and he hasn't shown up and he took your red or blue because your team wasn't watching. The other guy is probably at the bot side of their jungle, and they may or may not gank mid or bot. But let me tell you this right now. Even if you know the enemy jungler isn't going to gank, still ping the map and let people know where he is, so your team can start to plan ahead and anticipate what might happen. The more games you play as a jungler, the more you use your head, the easier it is to predict where the enemy jungler is. I'm not correct 100% of the time, but getting it right 90% of the time is pretty good. To dragon or not to dragon? That is the question. At this point, you need to make a decision before it's too late. Do you want the dragon at level 3? Do you want to gank? Or do you want to keep farming? If you're going back to farming, just to let you guys know, there's a glitch at the Krugs. It's happened to me like 3 times already. Basically, when you queue into the Krugs at a certain angle and direction, you get stuck between them. You can't move or do anything but die unless you have another queue to get out of it, so just be aware of that. Dragon. There are 4 elemental dragons that could possibly spawn, and I have put them in order from best to worst. Number 1, Inferno. 2, Ocean Drake. 3, Mountain. 4, Cloud. Let's just say you're low elo. If it was me, I will only take it if it was a Fire Drake. The reason is your team can't make use of the Ocean and Mountain Dragon. They don't know how to stop themselves from dying, and all they ever do is fight in lane. They don't know how to farm and play safe. They also don't know how to push or attack towers. I don't know why that is, but taking tower is not their priority. People here don't understand objectives, and they only care about themselves. That's why people down here care about their KDR all the time. If your elo is a little bit higher, around mid silver or gold, I would take the Ocean Drake. Mountain Drake is questionable, it only helps late game. Cloud Drake for movement speed is a waste of time. Don't even bother with this one. You're better off ganking lane. Taking dragon as setup. Let's assume that you have decided to take the dragon. After you're level 3, recall back into the base, buy the hunter's talisman, and head straight to the dragon. If you have the enemy's red buff, then you don't have much time to waste. If you have save 2 smite, awesome. That's gonna make it easier. If you only have 1, you can still get it. And it doesn't matter which dragon it is. First things first, you're going to use your amazing logic and reasoning to predict where the enemy jungler is, so you know that it's safe to take it and no one's gonna backstab you. Originally, at the beginning, when I was experimenting, I ran into people half the time, which isn't good, and I failed. So that happened for like maybe 10 or 20 games, I don't remember. Now that I fixed everything, this cheese works 90% of the time for me. This is how I determine whether it is safe to take the dragon or not. Let's just say you know the enemy jungler is ganking top. Yes, you can take the dragon. You know the enemy jungler is top side. Yes, you can take the dragon. You know the enemy jungler needs to go back to base very soon, and you have time to get it. If you know you can get it before he comes back, then yes, you can get it. If you know the enemy jungler is ganking bot, no, you cannot take it. If you know mid is rowing bot, no, you cannot take it. You also need to consider how fast the other jungler can farm and the start point. If I went up against a slow jungler like Yumumu and I started at top when he starts at bot, it doesn't matter whether I take his red or not, I can jungle way faster than Yumumu. If you know there's going to be collision, you should probably wait until you're level 4 so the enemy jungler can go away. You don't have to take dragon at level 3. I don't always take the dragon level 3. It depends on a game. This is why I advise everyone to play all the other roles before jungling and trying out my guide. That way you understand the game more. Jungling is hard. You have to be actively thinking and know what you're doing. If you still want the dragon at this point and you know that you will be intercepted, one thing you can do is kill the scuttle crab if it's still there. When you kill the scuttle crab with vision, what it does is that it diverts people away. For example, when someone else is about to gank and they see the crab vision on the ground, it forces people to go around the dragon pit or use the blast cone to get past it without being seen. The downside of killing the scuttle crab is you won't be able to lifesteal off the crab after getting dragon. So what if the scuttle crab is already killed and they have vision on the dragon? What a lot of people don't realize is that you can sneak into the dragon pit, either with your Q or the blast cone. If you have to walk through the crab vision and show yourself, pretend that you're a bad jungler or something and you're ganking a lane. Now head to the backside of the dragon pit and get rid of those vision plants, ward, and then use a blast cone to jump in. Getting rid of the vision plants and blast cone makes it harder for the other jungler to check or steal. A lot of people don't know that you can't be seen in the dragon pit itself, even though the scuttle crab is giving vision. So what if you jump in and you get caught instantly? Well, you screwed up, so get yourself out of there and try again later. If they're bad and you know they didn't ward, go around pretending you're leaving and go back in again. Now you have 30 seconds to get the dragon and run before someone else kills you. For Vi and the dragon, I pretty much spam all the spells as much as I can so I can proc the passive to take less damage. I also try to time my smite near the beginning when I start killing the dragon to sustain, and one more time at the end to get my health back. If you look at my potions, they're still being used because I used it a little bit late. It takes me about 30 seconds to kill dragon, which is relatively fast. Usually at this point in time, the enemy jungler should have ganked already, but remember, you took his jungle buff, so even if he does gank, he doesn't have the power spike from the jungle buff. Remember that I said you have 30 seconds to get the dragon and get out? Well,
You gotta make a door. Nope.
at this point, you have a choice. You can either gank bot or mid immediately before they run away or go back, or you can go back to farming. Whatever you decide on, remember to get rid of the vision plants on the other side and put a deep ward. Not for you, but for your teammates, because you know the enemy jungler is coming back soon to gank for his jungle buff. With your intuition, your logic, your amazing common sense, assuming if you're still keeping track of the enemy jungler, continue to use your head. Anyways, most of the time people will just run away or back off from bot because they know I'm right next to them. This relieves pressure at bot. Do I always take dragon at level 3? Well, it all depends, you know. You have to make the judgment and your own call. Just because your teammates demands a gank 3 minutes into the game and dies you, doesn't mean you should gank them. Don't let your teammates make the call. You have to make the calls yourself. You are the jungler. Again, your teammates are your worst enemies. They don't know what you're doing or what they're doing either. They don't understand anything. They cannot comprehend that nobody can see you in the dragon pit. And by walking into the river full of the wars, standing in front of Scuttlecrab, Vision, and Hacking Dragon, that lets everyone knows that you are killing dragon. Mid is gonna come, jungle is gonna come, bot is gonna come, and when you guys die, everyone will blame you for their mistake. I personally never ask people to help me at dragon or mention it at all, unless your enemies are there to contest the dragon.
I didn't lure her here. She literally walked over here.
You know why? Why you and I?
Yeah! Teamwork!
Rift Herald. Rift Herald is the same. You can kill it at 10 minutes right when it spawns, no problem at level 7, even with these few items. This takes about 35 to 40 seconds, which isn't too bad. And the only thing is that you have to ward and be aware of the jungler's position, as well as mid and top, who are more likely to roam at this time. Again, like Dragon, sometimes your teammates might actually lure people to kill you. The latest you should ever get the Rift Herald is at 15 minutes. Anytime after that, it's really difficult because people are going everywhere now, so you will need help after that. In part 3 of this guide, I'm going to explain how I compensate for losing a gank in 10 CS using this tactic, some counter jungling, and team fights.